Stuart Clifton murder is rare. For a man to kill twice successively is very rare, but for two men to kill in successive episodes, it's almost unheard of.
It's certainly unheard of in Lincolnshire. Two murders that are so similar in the space of 4 months causes me to worry a great deal. I'm worried that this may develop into yet another murder, may develop into a serial killing.
Get to the river down this path, can't you?
Yeah.
And beyond the river would be Fred Maltby's farm. Is it walkable from here, would you say?
Yeah, there's a bridge just along the way. It should take about half an hour or so.
Well, I guess it's a good place to start then, isn't it? The houses have all changed, but these brick walls show us that it's still the same place. So, this is the expected route that Dennis Smalley took when he committed his first crime, which would go on to only a couple of months later be another crime, and oh boy, I have to be very careful. But my neck. It will go on to be a second murder, 2 axe murders in Lincoln in the early 90s, which shook this little city and gained national exposure, and I thought I'd pay a little trip as I walk to the place of the first murder and tell you a little bit about it. During the walk I'll take you to a couple of other places which are important to the story. What I'm going to do it backwards. I'm going to do the second murder first, and I'll show you now where it happened. So Joe Ryler was a bookkeeper, a divorced bookkeeper. He lived on top of Joe Ryler Bookies, and in early 1992 his son found him. His son managed the booking shop and found his father dead. He had quite deep wounds into his head, quite deep lacerations. A very violent, very aggressive, violent murder. And now Joe Ryler was like, he had a bit of money and he would always do people favours. He would always lend out money. You know, probably being a bookkeeper, lending out money doesn't do him any harm. But if the fee was reasonably small, so it's said to be less than £150, he wouldn't chase you. But this alarmed the police because there was lots of people that he had lent money to, and that could have been a reason to kill him. Now I'll send you a little clips of the Crimewatch reconstruction. It was, if you're not from England, Crimewatch was the show at the start. Nick Ross, what a show, I miss it. They did a reconstruction along where it happened. So along here, this is the route he took. Now it was shown twice on Crimewatch because the first murder took place, and obviously it was a big deal, an axe murder in Lincoln, and then within 3 months there was another one, so obviously it became quite a big deal. There was the second one, the one we've been speaking about, the Joe Ryler one, made more sense because he lent money out. Made more sense. They could get more of a motive for it, is what I mean. He lent money out, and somebody could have not wanted to pay him back and murdered him. But also, when they found Joe Ryler's body, his safe was open and over £3,000 was missing. Now, what baffled police was the first one. Well, I'll get the walk is, as on the documentary said, half an hour. I think that's a bit far-fetched, but I'll talk to you when I get there about that. But the Joe Ryler one gave the police more to go on, because in the gaping wounds in Joe Ryler's skull there was fragments of paint, and that was more of a clue than the first murder. And I will now take you to where they traced the paint back to, and their first big break in the case.
All of it to here.
So you can see that cream coloured house in the reconstruction. The police didn't have much to go on. In the back of Joe Ryler's head, in the wounds in his skull, there was a paint fragments, and they had to ascertain what paint that was. Now this took them to Belgium, France, Germany, trying to find the batch of paint, asking what components it had, and they found 24 possible candidates, and it was the batch Rust-Oleum, batch number 2185. Unfortunate for them, the company that the Belgian company shipped it to in England had only ever sold it to one firm. They'd sold 25 cans to one firm, and that firm was based here. And you can see that on the documentary. I'll probably just show you. So they went in there, that company there, and that's where Smalley worked, and they went through all the records, and he was the most suspicious. He had lots of debts, and they did some background checks, and they could see that he owed money to Joe Ryler, and so they were very suspicious of him from that point, but they needed more hard evidence. But just that one thing, that little fragment of paint in a gaping wound in a man's skull, they could track it back to that building there, which is where it came from. And we'll go back to me walking, and then we'll go to the next location. We're still on the walk the killer took. Now, this, in the documentary they say about he walks down here. Now, the first murder, which is the one he walked to, Fred Maltby's farm, was over there. And he owned a lot of the land that was over there. And there was a mystery of why he killed him. Sunlight, we don't get that in England these days, so I'll just stay here a sec. Now, I'll push on. Now, they believed people might have thought he had money. Now they could link the paint back to the office, to the factory where Dennis Smalley lived, and they used the paint to trace that. And the first murder where we're walking to, they believe, Dennis Smalley worked on his farm, and it was believed that he somewhat knew him, and he also had an application to do. He was into pigeon shooting, or clay pigeon shooting, I don't know. The cathedral, can you see the cathedral? There it is. What's that? And so they thought he might have been on his farm to do that. They theorised that this is a very common walk. I can see 3 people that way, one's just gone by me, one straight ahead of me. So quite a popular walk. And over there wouldn't have been the houses, it was Fred Maltby's farm. So you don't know whether he was walking here on a night and thought, oh, he's alone and this is his getting his routine and everything, and thought he would have, early 90s old retired fellow with a farm, might have a lot of money on site, and they think that was the motive for it. The police, although they had they went to the factory that we just visited, and they could identify that Dennis Smalley worked there, and he was the most suspicious of all the employees, because doing their initial research on Joe Ryler, they found out that Dennis Smalley was one of the people that he had lent money to, but initially he had been ruled out as a suspect because he had an alibi that on a Tuesday night his wife worked at the Asda, the big Asda, just over there somewhere, and so Dennis would have to look after the kids. But a neighbour, a very eagle-eyed neighbour, was noticing that Dennis was leaving the house of a night, and she was so worried because she knew that the mum was at work that the kids were being left alone. Dennis Smalley had 4 kids, and he was going out at night and leaving them, and that was his alibi. And when the police started looking into it and going door to door of where Dennis lived, they could see that his alibi wasn't very tight. And even after all that evidence, the police still needed something more. And it was one day in 1992 where children were playing on that island over my shoulder, which is inaccessible other than by boat. That 3 kids got on a boat, which you're not meant to do, and went across on that island, and on that island they found the axe, and they they picked it up and they took it to the police, and the police took it, and it had the metal, the paint that was used from the factory on it, and it had the blood of both Joe and Fred, and that was the breakthrough that they needed. And after that, the evidence went from being circumstantial to pretty damning, and that's the island. If you watch the documentaries about it, the police are very honest in saying that if it wasn't for that fluke find of the axe on that island, then Smalley never would have been found, never would have been convicted of the two murders. He, I imagine, was trying to throw it into the water. He probably came at night and just chucked it. His probably heart sunk when he didn't hear it plop. But I imagine that's what he was trying to do. But it didn't work. And then, finishing off of their inquiries, the police doing more scooping, what's the word? Investigating. That's a better word. Investigating on Dennis, they could see that within 3 days of the murder of Joe Ryler, where the £3,000 was taken from the safe, Dennis had paid off £2,000 to a debtor. And the motive, not just being mainly being money, but the reason Dennis needed money is he was over £45,000 in debt. His wage slip wasn't even going in, and it was out, and he was owing more. So every month it was piling up and up, and desperate men do desperate things, I guess, even murder at times. But that's the axe murders of Lincoln. I'll drop you in some of the reconstruction. I find it fascinating being here, and they filmed on site here. They originally thought it was two kids. I wouldn't show too much of the reconstruction. It's not my stuff to use. This murder, the Fred Maltby's farm murder, Fred Maltby was found the day after by somebody wanting to buy fruit with him. He would sell fruit from his farm, and reports came in that there was a driver along Brant Road, which is where his farm went onto, quite a busy road just south of Lincoln City Centre. Two kids, or two youths, were seen running along Brant Road, and they darted in front of this car. And also in the Joe Ryler murder, two kids were seen sprinting around the time of the murder from the bookies. So that's why in the intro of my video it's about two people. They thought it was very bizarre that there was two people committing two axe murders together in Lincoln. Very unusual, but it was just one, and it was a desperate man. Both Joe Ryler and Fred Maltby were retired men. Fred was 71 and Dennis was 69. If I'm wrong, I'll do my usual, just edit myself at the top. So we're at Brant Road now, and I'll get my bearings and I'll find out where his farm was. It's been knocked down, but I'll show you where it was, and I'll show you a couple of the reconstruction things and try and match them up. But a brief little walk gets me out the house. I'll speak to you in a sec.
One of Fred's oldest friends was Bill Lockley, who runs the garage next door. Fred himself was a skilled mechanic, and he'd often drop by for long chats.
So this is the same garage today. This was where Fred's farm would have been, straight ahead of us. And if we look at the arrow at the street lamp and the road sign, they are still there, the only things remaining.
Fred seldom went far afield, and when he did go out, he'd use the back door, leaving it unlocked behind him. An early riser, he was always one of the first customers at the village store across the road.
Morning, Linda.
Morning, Fred. Come for your bread?
That's right.
So that's where his farm would have been. That house is roughly the same shape of Fred's farmhouse. But the garage, we're just about to pan left. That's there. That's where he would go in for those long chats. And the shop is still there, but it's one of those premier convenience stores now. But this is the shop as well. So, if you're still watching, thank you. I thought it would be a good video once I knew there was a walk somebody took to commit a murder. I thought, oh, that's a walk I want to do. If you're still watching and you like me rabbiting on about quirky history, I like to term it, hit the subscribe button. I think this has been a good story about what a desperate man is capable of doing. I mean, he had a little bit of crime in his history, did Dennis, but nothing that you would think murder. But when he would do crazy things to a man. If you're still watching, hit the subscribe button. This is a crime story. I'm just finished reading a book on one of my favourite crimes in England that isn't super well known, and I'm doing a video on it in January, and this was a bit of a dry run for that. See how a crime video goes down. I will doing a music location next week. It's actually my last new segment of the channel is next week, so I've added crime this week, new one next week, and they're kind of going to replace the running videos. Maybe, who knows. Thank you for listening to Super Rabbit. I'm doing a video every Monday, and as you can tell by the last few, lockdown in England, last one is in Lincoln next week, and then hopefully I can get to a more far afield. It's Saturday. Have a nice weekend. Thank you for watching.
Don't have nightmares. Sleep well. Good night.
Good night.